So can you guys see the PowerPoint slides?
Yes, I'll say collective yes.
Excellent. So the topic, I chose to call it an in-depth look at root cause analysis. And by in-depth, we're basically exploring, we're going to try to get to the core of root cause analysis. So there is quite a few, I mean, this is a huge subject, and getting into it within an hour, um, I'm going to try to pierce to the core of it. So that's will be my ambition for today. And I've already gone over a little bit of what I'm currently doing, but prior to working at Clover Park, I spent about 8 years working all over the world with design for manufacturing and design for assembly operations. So me and my company would go into businesses and help them set up production flows or set up product designs in order to be able to make them, the product itself, or being able to have a process that makes that product. And that gave me an interesting perspective over time. So I started out as a mechanical engineer, but slipped more and more into mechatronics, primarily because it's very hard to find pure electrical or pure mechanical or pure software applications today. And a lot of the discussions that are going on is how do we blend these things? So there's talks about merging IT with OT, so information technology with operational technology, so bringing software into production realm. The only pure mechanical application we can find today are basically bridges, and even those are starting to have electrical components. So I basically got a crash course in mechatronics right out of the get-go from leaving mechanical engineering. So that's a little bit about who I am and sort of where my interest and experience in root cause analysis has come from. So today I was thinking what we're going to try to get through in this hour is we're going to start out by trying to define root cause analysis. And then we're going to talk a little bit about problems and opportunities from a perspective of root cause analysis. And then we're going to talk about tools and the concept of tools. Everybody loves tools, especially if you're been introduced to lean, for example. Tools is a very common topic. And then I'm going to talk about root cause analysis as a method and give a suggestion on for a method that you can use or borrow pieces from if it makes sense into you guys' own professional career or into your business. And then I'm going to give a couple of two example applications of where I've used root cause analysis that includes a piece of everything that I'm going to be addressing today. So sort of where we used root cause analysis in two different scenarios, and I'm going to try to point out in those scenarios the things that I talked about today, where those came in and had an effect. So starting out, then first part, definitions. So it doesn't sound particularly fun, but it's very important since we're a whole bunch of people here from different experiences and probably with our own definition of RCA or root cause analysis. I'm going to try to define it so that we have the same perspective of the information that follows. So if we look from a dictionary perspective on what RCA means, so then we have root cause, an initiating cause of either a condition or a causal chain that leads to an outcome or effect of interest. Okay, sounds straightforward. Then we look at the word analysis, a detailed examination of anything complex in order to understand its nature or to determine its essential features, a thorough study. So to me, this is very interesting because basically then root cause analysis is the same as analysis. Root cause and analysis is more or less the same word. We're basically going to perform an analysis, and for some strange reason, it has drifted into that we sort of have to use 3 words to describe something that is just analysis. And this is something that I talk to students about, but I talk to industry partners, customers, those kinds of things as well, is that analysis, probably thanks to how news outlets and others approach analysis today, is that we're dealing with analysis is not the same as I think or I feel about the subject. Analysis is, again, we're going deep into a subject, and we're observing it and taking notes, empirical notes. And then after that, we take those empirical notes and we start to try to make some sense of what it is that we saw. And this is very important because when people hear root cause analysis, it's hard to not slip into that realm of where you start to look at sort of biases, personal experiences, and basically jumping to conclusions. And that's the last thing you want to do about RCA. And we can already see this. So if we leave the realm of dictionary definitions and we go into sort of business management or industrial management definitions, I pulled 3 here from 3 different sources that are pretty sort of how they're usually perceived. So the first one is root cause analysis is a problem-solving method which is used to pinpoint the exact cause of a problem or event. Okay. Then we have one that says root cause analysis is an approach for identifying the underlying causes of an incident so that the most effective solutions can be identified and implemented. And then we have root cause analysis is a class of problem-solving methods aimed at identifying the root causes of problems or events. So all of these sound pretty straightforward. But already here we have some huge discrepancies between these 3 definitions. So the first one says in singular, it's a problem-solving method. And you'll see that, and this is my personal opinion. No, it's not. Root cause analysis doesn't solve anything at all. It solves absolutely nothing. And if you try to solve things with root cause analysis, you're cheating yourself out of how powerful root cause analysis and other operations that you do afterwards can be. It also states that we find the exact cause. And here is where these trainings, or if you read a book, or if you're listening to somebody, where this can also go a little bit wrong. If you're new to this, or you're trying it out, or you're still learning and you haven't found a sort of a comfortable flow with working with this, exact cause, yes, you can find an exact cause, but that's promising a lot. That's promising, and I'll get more to this over this hour. Then we'll look at different statement. It's an approach. No, it's not really either. Underlying causes, yes, that you will be able to find underlying causes. And sometimes you find underlying causes, sometimes you find the exact causes. But those underlying causes is also very unspecified, and it's not really helpful there either. And then it promises that we'll find the most effective solutions that can be identified and implemented. And that's also promising a lot. Root cause analysis does not promise that we can find any solutions at times. And then the third, a class of problem-solving methods aimed at identifying root causes of problems and events. And that's, again, it's talk about problem-solving methods. So all of these things, in my opinion, root cause analysis is not about problem solving. However, from root cause analysis, it can lead to problem solving as a positive side effect. And I mean, most likely you're getting into root cause analysis because you intend to solve problems. So I mean, so that's good that those two line up. And is the second part here is then it's not about methods either. Methods and tools will be an organic outcome of root cause analysis. And that's another danger where you set out to do root cause analysis and you're looking at what other people have done, you're benchmarking, and perhaps they say, well, we had a tremendous success with this method, or we had a tremendous success with this tool, or we used root cause analysis and this solved this problem that was extremely beneficial for us. That, and I mean, we should always be looking at those things, but that we're missing out on a lot. Like you can do that and have a tremendous success, but you're missing out on sort of the point, in my opinion, of what root cause analysis brings you as an individual or as an organization. And you'll hear me reference individual and organization here because I feel that root cause analysis is sort of a mindset that you can apply to yourself as an individual in your professional and sort of civilian life, but you can also use it as a whole team, as a whole group. So it is a necessity of operations, and it affects us on. We can basically do it on the strategic, the operational, and a tactical layer of a business. And you're going to probably find that you are already doing this. It's just that it's not a conscious decision. And we will need methods eventually for working with root cause analysis. It's good to borrow a method or implement a method that somebody else has used, but you're going to have to immediately be prepared to alter this method or work with it. And that's why I want to get to the core today, is because by understanding the core, we can take methods and start to shape them so that they fit for what we're doing, or create a method of what you're already doing. And the method here is basically that you're just organized about what you're doing. So you could be doing exactly the same thing that you're doing Monday through Friday, but you're now making it into a method, which means that you're basically paying attention and writing it down. So as a business, we need, or as an individual for that matter, we need to constantly be learning and developing. And this is really where root cause analysis comes from, is that process of constantly learning and developing. So it's basically a part of how we as a business or individual constantly do evaluate and learn. And you'll hear a lot of crosstalk that sounds very similar to what you hear in a lot of sort of quality engineering, so like lean manufacturing and those things. And the reason for that being is that lean is basically standardized common sense, and it's standardized human behavior. If you're working at a place that is currently, paying the bills and having a salary, you are doing this already. So that do evaluate and learn, that's where root cause analysis comes in. Is basically we're trying to make it a conscious part of do evaluate and learn. So when you try something and you see what the outcome was, maybe we sold a product, maybe we were able to manufacture a product, maybe we're able to provide a service, customer was happy, and then we saw, okay, well, that I mean, you're not really thinking about it that way, but you're paying attention to, well, the customer appreciated that part, or if we did this, that worked out kind of well. So and then that's why most job postings ask for experience. How many years of experience do you have within this subject? Is basically they're trying to purchase your root cause analysis. Like they're basically paying you for that do evaluate and learn. And now, especially today, but I mean, that's been for the last 50 years or so, unless you're Coca-Cola, there's very few companies that can live off of a single product, or you as an individual can live off of a single skill that is at its original competitive advantage from when it was launched or when it started out. So And in today's manufacturing space, where product life cycles are extremely short and turnaround times are extremely short, and we're being tested on our supply chains in terms of getting materials and all these things, where our do, evaluate, learn is going very quickly. And that means that our root cause analysis skills also need to reflect this and also need to be pretty fast. So the abilities then versus the constraints. So it's something we already do organically. So that's a huge win. But we need to get structured about it. And how that structure looks, there is no right answer. There's absolutely no right answer. But it needs to be structured. It needs to make sense to you, first of all. And then secondly, you need to be able to communicate that to other people so that it makes sense to them. And ideally, then you can include those people so that you together then can constantly refine that. Well, basically turning it into a method that is constantly developing to become a better method. Root cause analysis will also allow us to perform data collection and self-reflection that makes us innovative and efficient. So, and I'll talk about data in detail when we get to the method, but if we set out to actively do root cause analysis, an outcome of that will be that we're going to have to collect data, and then we're also going to have to address that data so that it's actually useful. And that's a huge win for your organization or you as an individual in general. And self-reflection then is that basically looking at what am I currently doing, or what have we been doing, and what should we change? And then that self-reflection also kicks in, and we did a change or we changed something, and we're looking at that again, and did it work? Are things better or worse? While doing this, we will discover problems. So commonly, root cause analysis is advertised as that you have a problem, we're going to find it, and that's going to solve it. Most likely, you have a whole bunch of problems you had no idea about. The very visual problems that you were already aware of, those are important to solve, but that's such a small piece of the puzzle where, and I'll get to this when we talk about the tools as well, is that's not really the strength. The fact that you already knew that they were a problem means that you're most likely already you've dealt with them in some way. Either you're ignoring them, feeling that that's a problem we can't do anything about, or that you're currently working on fixing it, and with time perhaps you will be successful, perhaps you will not, or that you're that you basically that you've already seen it, so now it's sort of out of sight, out of mind, it's being dealt with. Those problems, we can use root cause analysis to find those, and perhaps that's where we need to start if this is new, and we can practice our root cause analysis skills on those problems that are already visible. But that's not the true power of root cause analysis. Root cause analysis will lead us to finding basically problems all over the place. And that's really, really useful because that will allow us to work on those, and that will allow us to improve, and that will make us more competitive and better skilled at what we do. So that's a much bigger superpower of root cause analysis, is being able to find problems you had no idea existed. Then after that, since we're aware of them, we can work on solving those problems. And root cause analysis brings an important part of that equation, but it doesn't help us solve it other than that we can see how well we solved it and what we need to solve. And root cause analysis is usually brought up as a super negative bummer of talking about problems, but it's an equally effective tool at working on your successes. If you have a product that's sold extremely well, you can do a root cause analysis on that to figure out why was that such a good product? Or if you made something, why didn't this product cause me any trouble, or cost me less trouble that I'm used to? And that's a part that is normally forgotten about root cause analysis, as you can apply that same uh, set of skills or methods or tools, however you want to phrase it, on your successes to figure out recipes for future success. And that's something that we've used it in the past when it comes to prototyping. So a couple of years ago, we had sort of an average of something like 20 prototypes per product in my old company. And suddenly a project or two would come along where we only needed 5 prototypes. So we could do a root cause analysis on why it takes 27 prototypes to do this one and try to work on that. Or we could choose to, we'll look at this one that took 7 prototypes. Why did it only take 7? And get to a root cause analysis of that, and then we can apply that to hopefully then see that our overall number of prototypes necessary goes way down. So it's sort of a glass half full, half empty. And commonly it's very common that it's forgotten that you can use RCA on your successes and on your benefits. And that can be important to the culture and the mood at the company as well, is that normally when you start looking, you find problems all over the place. It becomes overwhelming and depressing. And that's not to be underestimated what that can do. So sometimes it could be good to pick a target that is based upon a success and start figuring out what factors and variables that actually lead to bigger success. And then if we look at the constraints then in comparison to those abilities, usually what we find is that it's very tough to know if we penetrated deep enough. It usually, in all the successful examples in all textbooks, and when people are talking about root cause analysis, they will give you those super awesome examples where everything worked out great. And then you sit down to apply it yourself, and you get into this place where your confidence is not quite there that you penetrated deep enough. So are we actually at the root of what caused this success or this problem? Like, how do we know? Like, how do we determine that this is deep enough? And the short answer to that is experience. And the second short answer to that is you can just own it. You can say, well, I determine that this is deep enough for me. Because this is another thing. You shouldn't listen to people who say that, you should have done this or you could have done this. When I did this, we got this deep. Like, no, you're going to have to call it and say that for my organization or for me as an individual, this is deep enough. I'm as close to the root cause as it fits my current plans and trajectories.
Carl, I have a question for you there.
Okay.
Are you saying that there's no like super brownie points for going deeper and deeper, but again, actually finding, getting to a point where you're working on the right problem, or what you think is the right problem?
Correct. And you're going to hear me talk a lot of smack about the tools here that are commonly used in root cause analysis, because the first time you try this out, if you do a sort of a standardized approach, is that you'll find that you're not going to get to those deep levels that is used in every example, in every operations management example. In the beginning, you're going to get deeper, but you're not going to get to sort of what other people would call that the root cause. But every layer deeper you go is going to be a success. And you're also going to get to a point where it's diminishing returns, where you can go deeper and deeper, but I mean, you're going to realize that we're now so deep that the sound business decision or the sound professional decision happened way above. So I have an anecdote of that. I was working on a project, and it's a fluid management system that is basically a whole bunch of valves that direct fluids to different places. And we're having this electromechanical valve that is acting up, and we're standing in a circle around it, 4 of us, and we're looking at it. and we're trying to determine how to proceed because we don't know we don't really know what's wrong with it. It's acting irregular. So which means that we're not, here's an example. We don't know what the root cause of it is because we don't know why it malfunctions when it does. So one of us is talking about, should we try to remove it and bring it back to the shop and dissect it and see if we can figure out what makes it tick? Another person is standing there and is, well, should we try to repair it here? Should we try to troubleshoot here? Should one of us run down to the control station and direct the flows manually, and we'll see what happens? And then the third of us puts his boot on the circuit board of the pump and just crushes it with the boat. And he's like, no, I think we should just replace it. And guess what? We had to replace it because he stepped on it. Now, there you have one of those where we had no idea what the root cause of it, but the correct business decision was, are we going to spend 4 people's salaries to look at a valve that is maybe, $1,000? Are we going to spend, 4 people an unknown amount of time trying to figure out what's wrong with this, or should we just replace it? In this case, I mean, it's kind of a brutish way of doing it, but one of us forced that decision by basically, well, now the root cause has changed. The root cause is that it's permanently broken. And these things will happen. So again, it's an anecdote, but it basically, now it's broken, so guess what? We're going to replace it. And you can get sort of lost in the root cause analysis where you miss that common sense part, which is why, again, I'm talking about trying to get to the core of it, is that it's very easy to get lost. Well, the method said, and the tool said, and Carl said, and we're now we have to get to the root cause. Like, no, you don't. You're going to get to a point where it makes sense to you to call it quits, and you need to have the confidence to act upon that. And then as you get better at this, that sort of you observe and you learn from that outcome. And we need to be standardized about that. We need to be having a method for that so that we're staying focused and staying on tracks. But you get to a point where maybe we should just change the root cause. We'll take control of this by now we own the root cause. So that, like, trying to go too deep, don't worry about it. As long as you're going one layer deeper than you were before, that's perhaps good. The other outcome is that, you call it quits when this makes sense for a individual or a business decision. And that's the next point. Then it's tough to know when to call it quits, where drop it, let go, refocus, do something else. Another constraint that we'll run into is that it requires usually a multi-level buy-in and involvement to be effective. And this is 2 parts here. The multi-level buy-in means that you need to have people below you supporting you in this. You need to have people above you supporting this, in that they're actively participating and providing the resources and any authority that is required to deal with this root cause analysis. And that sometimes can be hard to get because perhaps it costs money. Perhaps it requires time. So in an industrial environment where you're working, you're running full 3 shifts, 7 days a week, when are we going to have time to go into root cause analysis? And we get into that realm of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Kind of like, why are you poking on something that is working? Well, it could work better. Yes, but it could also work worse. Don't touch it. Leave it alone. Everything is fine. We're progressing. And that one is, and that's when I talk about my suggested method today, that's the one I'm going to try to deal with the hardest, is to get that, to try to stress the importance of that buy-in. And it's not just your manager or your general manager or your managing director or shareholders that tell you to not do this because they can't see an immediate profit, be it in productivity or money. out of it, but it's also to understand that this leads to, in long term, this leads to a much higher productivity and profitability over time if you get used to doing this and you spend time on it. Because it's not an apparent win in terms of, perhaps cash or time, but it will lead to, like, you will get faster at it, and you'll find those hidden problems. So perhaps the reason that you're working 3 shifts 7 days a week is because a large portion of that time is dealing with problems that you didn't know were problems. And I'll try to point at some examples here of that, where it's a common thing where people believe that dealing with that problem is part of their job description, when it's actually, when you look at it, you do a root cause analysis of it, you say like, no, that's actually a problem and it shouldn't be there. And now we eliminate it. And who knows, maybe you just freed up 3 hours out of a 40-hour work week. And perhaps you should reinvest those 3 hours into continuing to find more of these, so that we can get down to actually only needing to work 2 days a week with the same productivity as a 7-day work week. And then the second, the involvement. Not only do you need to have a buy-in that it's allowed, but you also need people to participate. You can do this as an individual, but that's not when it's its most effective. It gets really effective when everybody's working on this, on the individual level, all the way through an entire department, all the way through an entire organization, and then through an entire supply chain. That's when this gets really, really valuable. And that's going to require a lot of, again, definitions. Why I start out with definitions is that you're going to have to make everybody speak the same language first. But that's going to have to come organically. If you can't do it as an individual and then sort of grow that bubble, it tends to be very difficult. But don't give up. The quest for quality is a death march. It has no end. So it will take, and then the other constraint is if people are expecting a quick return on this buy-in or involvement, it's going to take a lot of time before you get to the way that root cause analysis is talked about. So all these success stories that you hear, expect a lot of failures, dead ends, that it wasn't as of an impressive example as you heard this company talk about or so. But that's not really the point of it. You need to make this a habit of your everyday life, or a habit of your organization, is that you just do this and you're not really expecting any returns. So it's a subconscious activity of just, looming around until you find something and then dealing with it. And then you'll find that if you have this skill set aboard, when a catastrophe or an emergency happens, you'll be able to channel in on this and quench that fire extremely quickly. Any questions prior to moving on then to the tools? Because I'm going to go a little bit deeper here into tools next.
So far, there haven't been any questions.
Gotcha.
So far.
Well, hopefully it's because everything makes perfect sense then. We'll see. So that's sort of the, still when we talk about the definitions and my opinion of it, now we're going to move on to the tools. So depending on what you've heard before or you have looked up, something that usually pops up when you talk about root cause analysis, okay, here's the tool that you used for root cause analysis. And some of them are, I think the most famous one is the 5 whys out of Lean. But there is then like fishbone diagrams, Pareto diagrams, FEMA analysis, the entire sort of discipline of Six Sigma, and those kinds of things. So I'm going to immediately rip on those right off the gate.
Hey, Carl, just before you rip on those, there was a question that just came up, and that was your thoughts on what if we're dealing with a reoccurring problem? So a problem keeps coming up over and over again.
Excellent question. There you have, so if it keeps on reoccurring, there you have an excellent feedback loop that you haven't gone deep enough. Mm-hmm. So if you try to solve, like you're looking for the cause of a problem, and then that problem pops up again. Now you have the justification, and an excellent justification, go deeper. And there you have that ability to, you only need to go as deep as that problem going away.
Oh, that's a great observation. Great question. Thanks.
So there you have a somewhat of a feedback loop. Now that's not the ultimate answer, but it's a suggestion, especially when starting out. And that's also, then you know that you're being constrained, like you're basically using your resources widely as well. Because so here's an example of the 5 whys. So the idea behind the tool, the 5 whys, is that you encounter a problem, and then you ask yourself why 5 times, and that will bring you to the root cause. So level of problem, there's a puddle of oil on the shop floor. So that is a problem. You can slip on it, or the EPA will be unhappy with you, whatever it might be. And the corresponding level of countermeasure then is that you clean up the oil. And the point that they are trying to make here then is that next day you come back, the puddle of oil is back on the shop floor. So we ask ourselves, why is there a puddle of oil on the shop floor? It's because the machine is leaking oil. Okay, so we fixed the machine. So we've gotten one level deeper. And then you come back perhaps a week later, and there's now oil on the shop floor. So you haven't quite solved the problem, and it keeps on coming back. So then we ask ourselves why again, and it's because the gasket has deteriorated. You find out when you're digging deeper. So we replace the gasket, but oil comes back. We investigate again. It's because we ask ourselves why again, because we bought gaskets made of inferior material. So we change the gasket specification, but it still doesn't solve it. The problem comes back. It's because we got a good deal or price on those gaskets. So we need to change then our purchasing policies, because apparently purchasing changed, supplier perhaps of the gasket without telling us. That still doesn't solve it. So we ask ourselves why one more time. Is because the purchasing agent gets evaluated on short-term cost savings, and thus we change the evaluation policy for purchasing agents. Thus we've gotten to the root cause of the problem, and now we will never have oil on the floor again. And this is a very common, from a perspective of lean, they love this one because it goes all the way down into pointing at the people for short-term cost savings. And, you guys are not thinking long-term and sustainably. So, I'm glad we got to you. And the thing here is that there's a couple of problems with this tool, is because we already know what the problem is: oil on the floor. Well, this is not really how this works. It's a good chance, so in reality, it's a good chance the person who works on the floor sees oil on the floor, cleans it up, sees oil on the floor, cleans it up. And if they haven't been told, or if this is something was there already when it come there, they believe it's part of their job description to do that. That you become aware of oil on the floor, as a metaphor, is very slim, because people will assume that it's part of their job description. So already there, like we've already somehow figured out that this is a problem. And I mean, oil is a good anecdote or metaphor, because you're not supposed to pour oil on the ground. But most of these problems, people think it's part of their job description to deal with them. So already here, this tool has jumped ahead, and is way further along than where any of us start out. Second of all, we get to the point where we need to talk to purchasing. Everybody who's dealt with purchasing knows that this is completely unrealistic. Talking to purchasing, getting them to change or do something on time, not a chance. So already here, we know we're going to get stuck in reality on the good deal on gaskets. Well, it could be also that, by the time you get a response in your email, 6 months has passed and you forgot what it was that you sent that email about. So, and we can look at another example of the 5 whys here. Is that is a little bit more jovial. You're driving and your car stops working. You ask yourself why. It's because we ran out of gas. You ask yourself why. It's because we didn't buy any gas this morning. So we ask ourselves why. It's because we didn't have any money. So we ask ourselves why. Because we lost it all last night in a poker game. We ask ourselves why. It's because I'm not good at bluffing when I don't have a good hand. So the root cause analysis brings us down to that we ran out of gas because we're poor at bluffing in poker. And the solution then to this problem of running out of gas is quit playing poker or learn how to bluff. And what they're trying to do here is from a perspective of levity, trying to point out that the solution to your problem is can be very far away to the problem that you're experiencing. So we see a problem and the solution is doing something that is very far removed in order to get to basically solving the root cause of that problem. But again, the tool and most of these tools always assume that we know what the problem is, and we also have all the information and data required, and that when we ask why, it allows us to transition to the next step. And that's a huge problem. Just that assumption in itself that we have a clear, like a limited scope, clear definition what the problem is, and that we also understand that it's a problem, it already there we've jumped so far ahead. And here is usually where the strongest disconnect is when it comes to applying this to your own organization, is that you only apply root cause analysis to things that you see plainly in front of you, by, do we have any oil on the floor, or how can we stop people from putting landfill stuff in recycling and recycling in landfill? Like you only address those kinds of things, and those are all important, and you will get to a point that you've solved so much around your shop that those are the things you have left, and you do that to keep the machine well oiled and moving, so that when new problems pop up, you're ready to deal with those. So the problem with the tools are they are a utility that we use at the very end of root cause analysis. So by the time you get to the very end, you have defined a problem, you've collected data and all these things. The 5 whys is sort of like that icing on the cake, the very last step that we do into sort of figure out when do we call it quits. And it might be 6 whys, it might be 2 whys, but like that's sort of the last thing that we do. You've navigated so many obstacles by then that it's almost redundant to do this 5 whys thing. However, the tools, particular 5 whys, is a very good tool to train an organization in the mindset of root cause analysis, because it basically asks people to go deeper and be observant. And so these are important points, like be observant, pay attention, question things. Like, is this part of my job description? If it's not, should it be added, or do we need to deal with this? So like just introducing root cause analysis on an organizational level, or as for you as an individual, the 5 whys is best an educational tool that allows you to get into the mindset of how you should be looking at your surroundings. So getting then to a proposed method, and I'm speeding things up a little bit here because suddenly we're almost at 11 o'clock. So here is a proposal for a method that you can take pieces of, you can ignore it altogether, or but the purpose of this method, again, is to point out some of the sort of the qualifying factors of what's a good approach to the core of root cause analysis. So we can apply this in 2 directions. So this is how I feel about it, is that you can use root cause analysis when things go suspiciously well. Don't forget about that one. People tend to be super negative always and use root cause analysis for problems. And unfortunately, there's no lack of problems in the world, so that can bog you down. And we're looking here to develop experience to train our organization or us as individuals to start getting fast at this and maneuverable at this. So perhaps we should start with something that went exceptionally well to get a feel for how we develop our own method, how we decide to work with this. And then you can also use it then, or as is commonly known, to look for negative outcomes, finding problems, getting to the root cause of those with the intention of eliminating them forever. Or forever is a strong word. They will come back again, but then you have a blueprint for how to solve them next time. Like, oh, we've done this before. That means that we just need to alter these two variables, and hopefully that will deal with it just like it did last time. So, I mean, sometimes it's of no fault of yours that these problems come back. So a question that we had in the comments was how to, if the problem keeps on coming back. Well, you need to find out, is it you who are causing it? Could be your supplier, or it could be your customer that's doing something. And you can, out of the goodness of your heart and also being, looking at long-term relationships, you can fix that for them. Either each time they cause it, and then perhaps start a conversation with them about how we can eliminate this as a team. And that's how, again, how you grow that bubble to include your supply chain. Or you basically come up with a blueprint how to fix it, so it's not really a big issue for you when somebody brings this to you. So if it happens in-house, yeah, we didn't go deep enough. But if it's something that's beyond our control, there's a chance to grow your bubble, or having at least a blueprint to deal with it quickly. So here we have sort of a standard layout for how a company works. The 3 layers. Top layer here is the strategic layer, or strategic level, general manager, for example. Then we have the operational layer in the middle with a department manager. We have QC, other department managers, purchasing, sales, these sort of operational level activities. And then at the bottom, we have tactical layers, where in this case, we have 3 shifts. Shift lead that runs that has operators, and they work 3 shifts. So this is sort of the company structure that I will use as a reference. So the proposed method then is so actively say out loud, we're going to form root cause analysis groups. And these groups are going to meet regularly. So we're going to basically set company time aside for these groups to meet. They should eventually be able to carry multiple projects, and they should be ready to shift focus and priority to when emergencies happen. And we have to basically use this skill set that we've developed in-house to deal with things that are of critical nature. Then in our method, we're going to identify key performance indicators within each group, the strategic, the operational, and tactical. And these key performance indicators will be different for each organizational level. We're going to reevaluate those over time, because it's a good chance that our RCA work will lead us to question and change what we what we deem as key performance indicators. And these key performance indicators will also change depending on emergencies. So as we might have supplier difficulties or delivery difficulties, or a machine goes down or so, we might need to change up what we measure as, what basically every company has a ton of performance indicators. Which ones are key, that we should be pretty flexible about picking. Then we're going to start collecting data for these key performance indicators, and we're going to start standardizing processes. And all these steps 1 through 4, we're going to do a soft start so we can practice this skill set on pet peeves around the shop or in the company. So I'm going to break down each point here in a little bit more detail, because this is way too broad. So the first one, form root cause analysis group.
Hey, Carl.
So yeah.
Hey, because this is so good and so helpful, we're reached the 11 o'clock hour. So I'm gonna invite you just to keep going.
Okay.
And then, of course, if people have questions, continue to ask them. And we understand if you need to drop off, but we'll make this video available on the CAMPS website.
Gotcha. Yeah, my apologies for going over time.
No, this is really good.
Gotcha. Yeah, and then please ask questions. And I'm also really interested, if you don't agree with something I'm saying or everything, please voice that, because that's almost more equal to or more important when it comes to something that is not an exact science. So when we form these groups on the strategic level, so there's going to be a group on each level, at least one. On the strategic level, they should meet once a month with the sole focus on root cause analysis. So this is not something that should be snuck in on any other like sales targets talk or new products that we're going to start making or anything like that. No, it should be a dedicated time for that. The topic is only root cause analysis. And the participants, this is also important, should be department managers and the supporting departments like sales, purchasing, quality control, and those. And it should be led by the general manager. Or if you hire somebody, perhaps if you're a large company or you're starting to seeing the value of this, that you can float the cost, perhaps have somebody that is more or less dedicated more towards this. But that should be the participants in that group. Then on an operational level, you will meet once a week with the sole focus, again, on root cause analysis. And the participants should be department managers and the shift leads and any necessary support departments. And there's an asterisk on those necessary supports because they should be invited when they are needed there for input or action. If you need information from them or you need them to do something, they should be brought in. And normally, if you're dealing with something that's perhaps a little bit more long-term and that you're pursuing, perhaps they should be a permanent part for that particular RCA work. And then on a tactical level, they should meet once a day with a partial focus on RCA. And this is a personal preference of mine, is that each shift should meet for 10 minutes prior to the shift starting, or the first 10 minutes of a shift, to talk about sort of, today's activities, and their RCA should be a part. Because people on that level tend to be pretty busy also, so they don't want to focus on something that is beyond normal work. Yep.
Carl, a question came up, and I think it fits in here. So root cause analysis it's a tool, it's a tool for quality assurance ultimately, and so the question is how is it a quality program in and of itself? So I mean, so what you're recommending here, and I liked your thing about the 10 minutes before the shift, and then RCA becomes part of that because you're probably focusing on problems. But could you talk a little bit more of RCA as a tool, as well as this approach and how that's fitting into quality?
Sure. And so it's definitely a part of quality control, but it's very hard to do and have the permanent or sustainable outcomes that you might hope for. And I'm a little bit arguing against that point, that it's a tool and that it's part of quality control. I would prefer or recommend that you make it a part of daily activities, because that's how you will. So then when it comes to, and that's why you'll see here on all these levels, we have a cross blend of people participating up and down, is because if you're applying this as a tool on a strategic level, you will be most likely blind to everything that's happened on the tactical level and partially blind on the operational level. So you will have a very hard time getting deeper to the root cause if this is not something that people are practicing and training of being observant of as a natural part of activities. And I'll explain a little bit more to this. I can actually go into talking about when it becomes a very strong tool where we use it with like a laser focus.
Okay, and another question came up and you're saying maybe the tactical level is like the operations floor. So the people who are actually doing the work on the operations floor are a little bit more that tactical level, where there's a level of blindness in the operational management and this maybe executive management of the company. So it's harder to get to those root causes from that angle. And I'm thinking of, we've got several owners on the call who maybe their day-to-day isn't on the tactical level, on the operational level. But Dan Kosher asked the question. He's just asking, if a company has a lean organization, daily meetings and walkthroughs, you're saying RCA root cause analysis becomes part of that process.
Yes.
So you're incorporating a formal root cause analysis as part of that.
Yes, and they will have a very strict agenda that is on current root cause analysis projects. So after we've launched this, we're going to be picking things that we're going to try to get to the root cause of. And you can do this on the individual level, which a lot of people are already doing. Basically, all work is about problem solving for money. But in order for this to be really effective, and that's when I get to the examples of how this is applied, I think I'll be able to point out exactly why this is going to be very important. Because if you're sitting, you get a call from a customer and they say, we have a warranty claim here where your product, basically went out of spec, or this is broken and this is a warranty claim. Where did that happen? And how are we going to deal with that is a decision and a chain of events that is going to go up and down. We have a customer relationship that we now need to perhaps save, salvage, or maintain or work with that is going to be important upwards. And whatever happened to that product is going to be on the individual operator or technician that perhaps, and it could be multiple ones. If you want to get to the root cause of that, you're going to need your entire organization having any idea what you're talking about, and also having a practice to being able to, because the focus cannot go away. Like, this needs to be a fast and very, it's an analysis. It has to be, very factual, very quick, and no room for, again, the opinions and the feelings and I expect or I suspect. No, we need to try to eliminate those. And also, a lot of things, like, it will never become a warranty claim if, on the tactical level, your operators, like the people working the shift, if they have that root cause analysis mindset, they will remove a lot of these problems before they become a problem as part of their job. And that's why this fits very well into Lean, because root cause analysis is a very important part of continuous improvement, because it's the mechanism for where we collect information that leads to facts. And I will talk about this when we get deeper into basically these key performance indicators, which is, so we can use RCA as a pinpointing tool. We can use the 5 whys as a tool, but as I pointed out, like, usually we're so far ahead that when we go to do that, we have a tremendous amount of information already available to us. So I hope that sort of push the question a little bit forward ahead, and I'll try to provide some more examples for where the difference or the similarity would be. So the intention, again, is to carry multiple projects through this, like RCA projects. So we're going to pick something like this. This here is a concern of ours. Let's find a root cause. Or this is a tremendous success. Let's find a root cause. And the more layers here we can get to play along, the closer to the root we'll get.
So I just wanted to clarify, Carl, that this is essentially maybe from the top down and maybe even from the bottom up, identifying specific problems, having focused RCA projects to say, if we could solve this problem, things get better. Yes. So it's a part of a continuous improvement.
Yes, absolutely. It's a paramount cornerstone of continuous improvement. You'll, like, once you introduce this and make this mandatory, you'll have operators ask, like, so why are we doing these 4 process steps that nobody cares about and that is causing half the defects of our products, but doesn't really fulfill any practicality? And you're like, what? And they're like, well, since you asked and this is something we're working on, I thought I'd bring that up. Why didn't you tell me before? I was like, I don't know, not my job. So, and there's another danger here, though. Like, this sounds suspiciously a lot like meetings, and nobody likes meetings. But I will provide a tool. I'll provide a tool for meetings. And And then as we have this, so we're constantly feeding information up from strategic to operational to tactical, and from tactical, operational, or strategic. So when you're trying to do RCA on the strategic level, you're going to have to pull information from your tactical layer very quickly, or you want to very quickly and very accurately. So you need to have that communication chain happening, which is why you don't have everybody participating, because that's going to be a mess. But you have key people participating up and down, and they're the relayers of information. And then the added benefit is that you can jump into when an emergency actually happens, this machine is ready to deal with that, and so that the impact becomes minimal. So after we form these groups, right now there's a whole bunch of confused people sitting in different rooms at different times of the month, week, and day. We're going to identify key performance indicators. And this is a very broad term, and they're going to be different from every person to every organization. But we're going to pick those that we feel are important to us and to our processes. And once we start looking at those, that's when we're going to start to discover the discrepancies. And when we start to change our KPIs, either switching to different ones, because suddenly now we're looking at them and we're like, this actually makes more sense. And this, again, is an organic process that changes over time, continuous improvement. But it's when we really start to look at, we decide this is a key performance indicator, and this is what we're gonna study. You're gonna start to get information in, and that's when you start to find the oil on the floor and all these things. Is like, I didn't know we did that.
Hey, Carl, this occurs to me that there'll probably be a benchmark of measurement. So if you've got a KPI, you'll be measuring this consistently over time, and you'll have a benchmark to say, we have this many returns or this many, broken parts per million or per thousand. And so you'll have some kind of a benchmark measure, and you'll, from an executive level, you'll probably be saying it would be great to improve this benchmark.
Yes. And then there you have your first RCA. You're basically looking at, so we're seeing that this could be, can this be higher? Can this be lower? Is this actually a KPI? Maybe we need to start there. Is this a KPI?
Mm-hmm.
Where you start to go deeper. And also it brings some flexibility to, then you have the mechanism that you can shift those focuses, so you can pick different ones, or you can improve upon the ones that you have. But a lot of the times, this is where you'll find those hidden problems, because when you're investigating your KPIs, you can find that, I thought, or I felt, or it seemed like, are common things that you hear when you really start to measure those. So suggestions for those KPIs is, so in the strategic level, they tend to be worried about like supply chain optimization, sales and operational planning, system equipment implementations, outsourcing, business performance metrics. And on the operational level is supplier and customer collaborations, demand and capacity planning, inventory, productivity. And then on a tactical level, they're working day to day, week to week on order fulfillment, uptime, OEE, material utilization, safety things. Where one company I worked with, we had people getting hit by forklifts. And that was something that went into a root cause analysis. Why are people being hit by forklifts? Because, and that was a good start at that company to get into this, because that's unacceptable, and you really want to make sure that you get to the root cause of that, because you don't want to put up a stop sign and see if that worked or not. You don't want to put up those beeping sensors and see, did that work or not? Like that feedback loop needs to end once and for all. And that was that company's introduction to starting to do this in a standardized way. And then they were like, okay, since we did the forklifts, what else can we? And it started going after this. And you'll also find that by doing a root cause analysis, you really start to understand your operations very well. Because in order to do root cause analysis, you're gonna automatically create a lot of useful information that leads to facts, so that when it comes to, can we do this? Or on the strategic level, you know very well what your capabilities are and aren't, and what does hinge on. So that will lead us to that third category, which is start collecting data for your key performance indicators. Because here is a lot of the time where we get, like, that's the first place we will get stuck. You can form the group, you can pick the KPIs, but now we're going to need to gather information about this. So we want to find, basically the point here is to find the problems we didn't know we had. So I mean, if there's a fire axe in your PLC cabinet, or your lathe is under 6 feet of water, it's kind of obvious where the problem is. But once you start measuring, and here is why RCA is good from an organizational level rather than a pinpoint tool, is that in order to do RCA, we need to have a lot of information. And that's very different from data, but we have to start at data. And I find it extremely frustrating. It has become a trend word today. You hear it for like politicians, business leaders, people are like data, data, data. We're data driven. The data shows data is useless in itself. Data is basically the raw material to basically mine information. So you need to collect data. And especially today with industrial Internet of Things, IoT, we're going to put a sensor on everything that collects, every scan cycle of the PLC. We're going to be saving all the input and output statuses. We're going to send that to the cloud. And before you know it, you have 2.6 billion data points. Are you any close to knowing any root cause? No. So root cause analysis is sort of the sobering medicine for this data craze. Data can be turned into information. So data is just like 23 degrees Celsius, 4,000 RPM, 2.8, 6.5, just Excel sheet after Excel sheet of just numbers and variables. And there's a concept that that I preach a lot, or that we preach a lot in the program, is called DRIP, which is data rich, information poor. So you need to be careful what data you collect, so that you can use it to turn it into information, and then turn that information into facts. And here is a huge benefit of doing RCA widely and having people practicing it rather than using it as a pinpoint tool, is because you're going to start collecting data, and you will be able to start to figuring out what data is actually interesting, because it's a low-hanging fruit to turn that into information. And from that information, you can draw factual decisions that then lead to the change. And if you just start collecting data without doing any root cause analysis, you have no stopping mechanism. And you also don't know what you're collecting is actually useful. RCA will tell you what data is useful or not, and you can stop collecting if it doesn't make any sense. So another thing you will see is that information overload leads to complete loss of common sense. Whereas that, again, we're those 4 people standing around a digital valve, where the common sense was like, why, just replace it. And in this case, we have somebody that forced the decision, which is even better, because then there will be no wasted time on arguing about it. So data, information, and action is supposed to also then flow up and down between these groups. So as each layer is doing RCA, strategic, operational, and tactical, you need to be on a strategic level. You should be able to like, okay, this is really important for us. I need from you guys information, like data from this, or I need information from you guys. Perhaps you can process this data for me so that this helps in my RCA work. And at the same time, the tactical layer we found this thing. I need your buy-in and your permission, and perhaps a little bit of money to change this, because we can show you here that we found a root cause of something, and if we change this will make this problem go away. So that, and at the same time, on the strategic layer, they're also collecting data and information that will tell perhaps the tactical layer, like, no, don't do that. Like, within 6 months, we're transitioning away from this product. You'll never have to see it again. Make it work. but you only need to make it work for 4 more weeks. So like that data needs to flow up and down, and it's turned into information in these different instances, and it's turned into facts. But data is not facts. And that's something I want to stress, because today it's getting worse and worse. We make fun of mass production for building huge amounts of inventory and in both material and finished products. And yet here we are again, when we're transitioning into a different realm, is that we build huge amounts of inventory. So I guess we haven't learned much. And then from this, as we start collecting data around these KPIs, which again is very useful for our organization, we need to start standardizing our processes. And this will become self-evident, because you'll be most likely, because if we do something different every day without having some type of control over it, the data you collect will be completely random. The 5 whys you ask will be, more like, why did we suddenly change this, rather than getting closer to the root cause. So you can't get to the root cause if you keep changing all the variables around that particular problem, so that we're now getting a different input and a different input and different input. So that oil leaking machine in the 5 whys, if that machine is moved somewhere else, and now this operator is like, well, I solved the problem because the machine is gone, but now a new operator slips on that oil, and then we move the machine again. So every time we have moved that machine around, we're no closer to getting to the root cause. So we need to standardize in order to be able to do RCA. And we also need to standardize so that we can see if our root cause analysis machine is effective. So as we go for the root cause, we define the problem, and then we solve the problem. Now we need to see if that's stuck or not. And if we keep on changing things without keeping track of things, we won't be able to track if that was actually the root cause. Thus, we're not getting any better at it. And this is why this also goes into continuous improvement and standardization of lean. Is like RCA is, again, the fact checker and the sobering mechanism for these two. And all of these things, way easier said than done. So we're going to need to start off soft, and we can use the same mechanism. It's sort of like taking a ship out to sea for the first time, is that you can just pick something. We're going to make this the problem. Let's practice to get to the root cause of this, and then let's evaluate that we go from root cause analysis to define the problem, the scope of the problem. We'll try to solve it, and we'll see what it let us. Just so, and in the future, you can do this as well. I find this to be a problem that I want to focus on right now. This, like the groups are getting lazy, or or we have this ability, so why not? And that's why you can have multiple projects going on, because as you're collecting data to create information, you can spend your efforts on different places, and the better you get at this, you can start to look at sort of your organization as a whole, and suddenly you can't tell the difference between continuous improvement and RCA. And then you really succeeded. When this is something that just is ingrained in people, so operators are constantly just roaming around and basically thinking in sort of the 5 whys as a reflex, as a habit. So, but when you're starting out, pick something. Like, okay, this is what we're going to focus on, and we're going to be holding our instruction manual and reevaluating, crossing things out, adding things as we tackle this one. And you start there, and then you practice and you practice. Which leads us then to a very useful tool. So the 5 whys is an excellent tool, but we're already gotten to, like, suddenly we have KPIs, we have data, we have the groups, so that we can actually act upon this. So we, like, the groups will perform, like, they're the ones that can turn data into information and information into facts. They're the only ones that can do that. So when we have all of those, now we can use RCA as a pinpoint tool, and we can use 5 whys as a pinpoint tool to, again, when something pops up that we want to really focus on, or we have to focus on. Those are two different things, because we'll pick things, but sometimes we have to. Now we can use it as a pinpoint tool. Everybody is rehearsed in this. Everybody understands it. And then that's when you can get that effect of having one of those textbook examples that gets brought up when corporations are bragging.
Hey, Carl, there are a couple of interesting questions that popped up, and
Yep.
if you don't mind, I'll dive into these. Robert brought up this idea of he was referring to it was a Deming's principle, point 10 of his 14 points, but it had to do with the fact that a lot of the problems with productivity and quality are a problem of the system that we're using and not necessarily a problem of the workforce.
Yes.
I may not have said that correctly, but the idea is that if we bring up slogans, exhortations, and use words like KPIs, that becomes I don't know, less useful, to the workforce. But how do we separate, focusing on the process of a problem versus, again, slogans like, zero defects and higher levels of productivity. And so, we're saying these slogans and things that we want, but it's not getting us to the problem, which may be the system that we're.
Very good question. And that's what I was trying to point out earlier, as it's like, this is dangerous because it can lead to a loss of common sense. Like, you can get so blind to this that you lose all common sense. And the reason I always hesitate when putting down, like, calling it KPIs or talking about the strategic versus the tactical layer. So because it's not really useful language. The whole purpose and point of this is that you're trying to get it to a level of basically culture and a habit in people. Now, you need to have some kind of language, and for many reasons, but I always try to stay away from lean language. And the reason is not that there's anything wrong with lean. Now, lean is absolutely fantastic, but it's because it's so, like, there's so many associations and traumatic memories for people where different people's interpretations have dictated the conversation. And that's very unfortunate and very true, which is why I rip on the tools. Like, these tools are extremely powerful when you use them as tools, but this tends to fail when people, again, have a blueprint and it's like, well, we have to follow this.
So there has to be a level of intelligence, meaning not total reliance on the tool, but using the tool as much as it's helpful, but not giving up your common sense.
So in application in these meetings, it's especially, and that's why I really like those 10 minutes in the beginning of the shift, is that's when you go over things like, like what's currently ruining your day. Well, the forklift keeps on losing its charge, or I almost got run over today, or this, like, we keep on breaking bits on this machine, or like I keep on running out of spec, or I have the coolant pumps get clogged all the time. Like, that's the conversation you want to, and it's like, okay, like, and then you're talking to, okay, yeah, that sounds frustrating. Okay, like, now we have something to pinpoint on. So it actually gets a lot of sort of employee empowerment, because you're taking very seriously their concerns, and then you're also, if you're doing this right, solving them. So by fixing that coolant pump clogging will have the effect. So and that's where, that's that 5 whys, learn how to, bluff or don't play poker, is that from your organizational perspective, your warranty claims or your loss of sales is the fault of that clogging coolant pump. And that's what we're trying to get at. So, and that's why we can't be super bureaucratic about it, or have like this person as trying to do it themselves, because like all these things are interrelated, and usually you don't know it's a problem. So you need to encourage the conversation and empower people.
Well, what you're bringing up, Carl, which I really appreciate, is the fact that this becomes an organizational effort.
Yes.
Which then creates alignment and helps create culture versus something that's a one-off, may or may not help, but it's sporadic. And Allison brought up a question here. She said, I'd like to know strategies for how to handle a situation when the root cause is actually human error. So, so when you break it down and it's the people, what, there are some strategies for that, have you found in your experience?
Replace them by robot. No. The so there you so that and that's so I'm gonna try to be specific, but it's hard because who knows the circumstances. There are some aspects that has to do with training, that you can spend energy trying to train somebody. That is very expensive, and there's no guarantee that that will work.
Right.
Also, if that person is promoted or replaced, or does something differently, or enough time passes from this happen to not, that again, you haven't perhaps found a root cause of why this problem happened. I like to, if it was to me, I would probably look at how do I do a layout change or a process change so that a person can't mess it up. And that's is easier said than done. But
not to be insulting, but in many businesses I've worked in, many industries, we have called that idiot proofing.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's a whole paycheck when it comes to design for assembly, is that the root cause of that problem is, but you might have to talk to your engineer and say, like, when you draw this up, you need to or like when you draw this up, you can't make it so that this can be oriented in two ways. You need to add a feature that the customer doesn't care about, that like makes this thing only fit one way. And that's where you see this in a lot in clamshells and other things, is that you basically we're accepting human error by saying that there's no point in trying to convince the person to do this right. We're going to just do it so like the customer doesn't care if this feature is here or not, but we're doing it for our own sake to bring robustness. Another thing is to
Carl, pardon me for a second, just a time check. It's about 11:32, and so anyway, I'll allow you to bring things to a close as you can.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So final tool here, and when it comes to these meetings, here's a checklist. Clear objectives prior to meetings. So clear tasks and deliverables. We're not going to socialize during these meetings. We're going to go in, talk about what's on point, and then leave. Write people at the meetings. So if you're supposed to show up, and show up on time, and don't bring anybody else. Be prepared. Know what you need to know prior to going, what you should bring with you, and have that done. Use visual aids. Don't dump data on people. Use visualization, so graphs. Make it obvious. Red and green. Green is good. Red is bad. And then separate information sharing from problem solving. So information sharing should be a separate part, and then we get to problem solving. And then what I've sort of failed to hear today, I guess, is start on time and end on time. And that's, here you have a tool that you basically bring people into the HR office and tattoo on their forearm this checklist, and slap them on that forearm when they don't follow this. And everybody gets one. GM all the way down to person just started. And then a final warning on this, and then for anybody who's interested, I'll give 2 examples of where we've used this that sort of taps into all these layers, is if our RCM is done from sort of a catalog idiot's perspective, we can get some very unfortunate conclusions. And the worst one I think I've seen when I was thinking about is that a company had a policy which was, our product is so good that we do not need to offer a warranty. And that was that came from doing a root cause analysis, where basically the conclusion of that root cause analysis was like, yeah, just tell the customer, like the customer asked, why don't you have a warranty on this? We're like, it's so good, we don't need to offer one. And nobody sort of reflected out, like read that out loud to themselves, or took that to its logical conclusion. So like, be careful. And I mean, this is an extreme case, but it happens. And then again, root cause analysis doesn't solve any problems. It brings the scope, and it brings you closer perhaps to hopefully not having to see this, as well as creating mechanisms that you have basically then you have a tool. Oh, here's that problem again that we keep on having, but now we can deal with it quickly. Perhaps we can't eliminate it, but we can deal with it quickly. And then root cause analysis is your sensory input for all decision making from an individual level and up to an organizational level. If you do RCA, you can use that to, again, gather data, turn data into information, and then base decisions and upon those facts that you can derive from your information. So yeah, big topic, and you can go very deep into a particular part of it, but I hope that brings a little bit of my view on the core of root cause analysis. And I have two examples here where I was working with a semi-truck manufacturer in Southern Europe. They had a representation office that was going to turn into a market company, where you might have a salesperson or just a sort of a branch that does commercials for a large brand. And now when you turn it into a market company, you bring in things like, now you have a repair shop, parts, you do service, you do warranty work, all kinds of things. So I was helping in the process of setting up that market company for this semi-truck manufacturer. We're working, and suddenly he gets a call, and as he's on the phone, I see him turn white as a ghost. And he hangs up, and I was like, what was that all about? Okay, so do you want to come along? We need to go see this. Okay, so we go to a regional customer of theirs, and the customer we're pulling out, semi was pulling a trailer, dropped the trailer. So about 100 feet outside the gate, the trailer falls off. And when we get there, the customer is standing there, hands on hips, and looking very irritated. The trailer is sitting on those little stunt legs that you can sort of lower when you want to park it. And the fifth wheel is still attached to the trailer. And the semi is about 150 feet down the road with no fifth wheel on it. And this is a serious problem. This semi had been delivered about a week prior, and this was its first time going out, driving across Europe, towing cargo. So customer's furious, and the clock starts ticking and says that this is on you guys. This is a warranty claim. And now we have to deal with this. And again, the clock is ticking. This customer, I think, bought about 100 semis a year. So they basically had just taken possession of their 300th semi. So here we have a good root cause analysis situation popping up, where we need to know why the fifth wheel fell off. So first step, is this the customer's fault? Well, they can afford to buy 300 semi-trailers, and they most likely make a lot more money having trailers going than having them falling off. So most likely this is not a fraudulent claim. So we kind of skip that first. And it's also not really the best question to ask at that particular moment. Second, is this the trailer company's fault? Because the trailers are usually made by a different company than the semi-trailers. So get the rep for the manufacturer of the trailer to come down and include them in the RCA. Have a mechanic come out and do an analysis. And here you see that now the tactical labor is getting involved. We have a trained professional mechanic comes out, has a look at the fifth wheel, has a look at the trailer, determines that there's 4 bolts that have been sheared off, and looking at things like the powder coating, and other things, that it seems like this fifth wheel was only attached with those 4 bolts. And normally they have something like 12 or 14 on each side, attaching this fifth wheel to the semi. So that seems worrying. So call up head office, and we have a trailer VIN number, or semi, a tractor VIN number this and this, fifth wheel fell off. It appears that it was attached by 4 bolts only out of the 28, and these are the 4 bolts. Okay, the head office looks up that truck, sees what flow made it, what day, and they start looking into the reports of where, each assembly stage has reports like we took these parts, we took these parts. So you can basically trace it all the way down to its individual parts and when they went on and who signed off on them. And long story short, we find that in these reports that nobody signed off or checked that the remaining bolts. So basically the fifth wheel is attached with these 4 bolts, and then it goes on to a different process that then does the final assembly of those bolts. Nobody had actually signed that at all. It also finds when investigating this that this was the first semi rolling off the line on the Monday after industrial vacations in Europe, where people have 5 weeks off. This was the first semi that was done after vacations. So root cause analysis was that basically we came to the conclusion that in the manufacturing, they'd forgotten to add these remaining bolts. The fifth wheel was still attached by just 4 bolts. Everything looked right. Everything was situated, but the actual support, the strength was never there. At the same time, they were able to pull up to check all trucks after and prior to see, and there were signatures on all of those. So the rest of that order and other customers' trucks were most likely fine. So got to the root cause, gotten an idea of the extent of the problem, and could apologize to the customer, could fix it, and sort of guarantee them that the rest of the semis would be fine, but at the same time sent the mechanic around the yard looking at all the others, and as they were coming in then for another week or two, checking them to make sure that that was all right. So here is an example where everything went fine, but like we're now talking about multinational RCA where you have the initial findings is from a mechanic on the tactical layer that gets basically that information then, because he's able to turn that data into information. That information is set all up the chain through operational, through strategic, back to operational, and down to tactical then on the manufacturing floor, where they have all this, again, they had already collected data, they had already collected information on all parts and when they go on and how they attach themselves. So here you can see like everything was already in place. If the manufacturer had not kept track of what truck was made when, with what part, by whom, at what time, or which factory this truck was made at, like, we can take VIN numbers for granted, I guess, but before you have all these mechanisms in place, if this was our first day of RCA, we would have perhaps come out there and looked at this and not known whose fault it was, but we'll eat that because this is a good customer. And we don't know why we just dropped a fifth wheel. And we don't know how many of these are in existence. We don't know why. We're completely blind. So the fact that this was successful was not because of some brilliant intelligence or anything like that, is because we had a mechanism that could go from that mechanic's observations all the way back to when this thing came together, and basically trust each step of that process. That's when we could do the root cause analysis of this. So, and you don't start there. And this is why it's good to start this process earlier. And again, why you try to make this a habit. That mechanic was also sort of in the right mindset, because he, if he looked, he could have said, well, I have no idea. There's supposed to be 28 bolts on this thing, but I don't see any. Well, yes, it fell off. But, looking around, found the ones that were sheared off, and then looking at like, well, normally when I swap one of these out, we have rust spots, or like basically using some operational experience to be able to tell, like, most likely these were never attached or so. So taking that data and turning it into information, knowing that we're looking for a root cause of what's likely or not already on this level.
Hey, Carl,
Yep.
I want to give everybody some time I understand there might be a little bit more of the presentation, but I want to give everybody a chance for some direct question and answers. Do you mind
Yes.
if we go ahead and skip to Q&A from everybody?
Absolutely. Let's go for it.
Yeah, okay. I appreciate that. And I want to thank everybody. Um, and we would love some, yeah, questions and insights, and anything that you feel would be helpful for you. So you can feel free to take yourself off mute as you have questions. And I'm going to start. I'll start with one question right off the bat. But Carl, you mentioned the five whys as a methodology. And you talked about how to kind of make that a little bit more systemic throughout the organization. Uh, but have you seen some other approaches to RCA besides just the five whys?
Yeah, you can have some brutal results with Six Sigma, for example. So um, uh, the other example I was going to talk about is that we had these an consortium or an association of manufacturers that, by talking to each other, found that that they suspected that their material suppliers were basically not living up to par. Like the quality of the material they were selling did not follow the spec sheets. So we were hired to gather basically root cause analysis on material, which meant that we spent months. So here was one of those examples. We had a lot of data, but very little information. So it turned out we had, Excel dumps and PDF dumps of all of things from machine stopping going. Anyways, so we ended up having to collect all that data from that perspective of what we're actually looking for, which is that sort of picking your KPIs. And so we started gathering that, and we found quite a lot that when with then using Six Sigma, we were able to show that you can see the quality started to veer off on the material being out of spec in roundness, length, bend, material composition. And anytime there was a warranty claim, the material problems, the quality problems stopped, and the quality was good for a while, and it started deteriorating. There was a warranty claim, material popped back up into quality and was going steady. And that came from Six Sigma basically being able to map different sets of information then against one another. So we could look at time, warranty claims, and out of roundness or something like that.
And even though Six Sigma has its own maybe methodology, but ultimately these are coming back to measuring and gathering information.
Yep.
And then I'm still amazed that human beings are still the most, intelligent solution to most problems, even if sometimes we're the cause of the problem, we are also the solution to the problem.
Yeah, and us getting hired was based upon operators saying, like, this is not my fault. Like, I've done my own RCA, and if I know that I'm doing exactly today what I was doing 2 weeks ago, why am I getting? And it makes no sense that I'm getting a completely different result today than 2 weeks ago. That means that something else is changing.
Right.
And that came from, so these companies were doing, but then it grew out of their comfort zone. So like, and also they wanted a third party so that it didn't look super partial. But that came from empowering operators to like, they were conditioned to be looking for these things as like, this is a problem. Let's see if it happens every time I do this. No, it doesn't. Well, then it's not me.
Well, it's interesting, Carl, when you mentioned working on this as a company and in a group, but you have specific people assigned. It seems like the RCA specialists, if you will, would be, their main job would be, again, we're trying to identify the root cause of a problem. So they would be gathering information, putting together the measurements, the charts. And I liked your idea of visuals,
Yep.
making it very visual. And so it seems like, the people with more of that skill set would be useful in that position.
Yeah, if you're super lucky, you have somebody that's good at this, and they can be there as a support function to guide the conversation and keep people focused. Because since it's something you practice, is not you're not inherently good at it from the beginning. So if you have somebody who can like, tell me more about this, or like, you start asking leading questions. So do you think that this is something you're doing? And like, well, I don't know. Okay, so let's find out. It's like, so it sounds super dry with collect data, KPIs and stuff, but it is more of having conversations about like that, human curiosity.
Well, to me, the superpower that you mentioned was identifying problems that are not evident, and so that's when it starts to become a lot more powerful. is when you're getting beyond what's apparent and what you can see into things that you didn't suspect or know before. I'll just mention real quick, just from experience, I'm putting this into the chat box. It's a link to a website called drawtoast, drawtoast.com, which, if you will, it just kind of takes the same, all of the methodologies you can think of for root cause analysis, and puts it into a simple way to think about looking at, solving, and dissecting a problem. It's really phenomenal, simple, easy, a very entertaining TED Talk, but draw toast. So anyway, so all of these methodologies kind of come together in his talk and his website. He's got a great website, but it demonstrates some of the powers that you're talking about, Carl. And again, I think you really added this perspective of, putting some specialists into this. I really liked. I'd love to ask anybody else, Allison or others, what insights, what was helpful today?
My big takeaway was analyzing successes with root cause analysis tools. That was something that hadn't really occurred to me before. So I will definitely be doing that.
Yeah, that's awesome, actually.
And it can be very more uplifting to do that as well, because especially so COVID has brought some interesting sort of constraints where lean now is not really working out great, because people, if you're really lean, you have no inventory on hand, and you rely on things like just in time and other things where you're basically experiencing now that that brings some strong vulnerabilities as well. But the point being that it's everything is very dynamic and changing a lot. So if you're constantly chasing problems and worrying about problems, it's very depressing. And at the same time, a lot of these problems, that's part of why you're in business. Like, I'm solving these and charging people money for them. So like, I basically become a little bit of a sin eater. Basically, I'll take this problem on for you and suffer through its consequences, and you don't have to. But yeah, looking at positive things turning out, that's and some things you can write off immediately. So there's why is this machine not working as great as this machine? Well, it's 20 years newer. We don't really need to go to the root cause that is this particular bearing today, because it's going to be something else next week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really, I don't know. I think your examples were instructive, and your thought processes. And I want to thank everybody for being here and being a part of this. I'm not hearing a lot of other questions coming up, and I didn't see any more in the chat box. But I want to thank Carl. Thank you so much for doing this and being here for us. And Allison, thank you for recommending this topic. And we're going to look forward to more topics. I highly recommend Clover Park Technical College. Their FSME program, their associate's program, their mechatronics program and bachelor's degree now. And if you haven't seen their building, they have an entire building dedicated to advanced manufacturing. And it is with all the tools, all the CNC machines and water jets and lathes. I mean, it's got everything in there, the robotics and Industry 4.0 technologies, really something to see. So we're looking forward to, a continued and stronger relationship with Clover Park. Allison, just because you brought this up, is there any last thoughts you want to share with us? Okay. Well, I want to thank everybody for being here. I'm going to go ahead and end the session now.